Hello students, I am Nitish Bhuchetti, working as an assistant professor in Government Women's First Grade College, Kalburgi. Today's video lecture is on the topic figurative language, which is lesson number 6 from unit number 2, reading poetry from the prescribed textbook Cogitations for BA first semester students studying in colleges affiliated to Karnataka State Akamadevi Women's University. As already mentioned, today's lecture will be on figurative language and will deal with the definition and usage of the literary devices, namely simile, metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, personification, apostrophe, conceit, hyperbole, understatement, and others. As mentioned before, this lecture is for students studying in BA first semester optional English. We will now move on to our main topic, that is figurative language. First we'll have to define what figurative language is and how does it help us with better and effective communication. Figurative language is a language that is intended to create an image, association or other effect in the mind of the listener or reader that goes beyond the literal meaning and expected use of the words involved. Figurative language uses different literary devices to make writing more impactful or effective. Now that we have come across the term literary devices, what are they? In literature, any technique that is used to help the author achieve his or her purpose is called a literary device. Typically, these devices are used for an aesthetic purpose, that is, they are intended to make the piece more beautiful. They are essentially tools that a poet uses to create rhythm, enhance a poem's meaning, or intensify a mood or feeling. Examples of literary devices include simile, metaphor, synecdoche, personification, irony, and others. The first literary device we are going to learn about is the simile, the most commonly used literary device. There are two figures of speech based on resemblance. They are the simile and metaphor. A simile is a figure of speech that is essentially that two essentially dissimilar objects or concepts are explicitly compared with one another through the use of words like or as. A simile is a phrase that uses a comparison to describe. For example, life can be described as a box of chocolates. Examples of simile in literature. We have Robert Burns' poem A Red Red Rose, in which he writes, "My love's like a red red rose." Or we take Daffodils by William Wordsworth, in which he writes, "I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats so high over vales and hills." Or we take Harlem by Langston Hughes. He writes, "Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun?" Here the use of words like and as are examples of similes. The second literary device we are going to deal with is the metaphor. A metaphor is a figure of speech that, for rhetorical effect, directly refers to one thing by mentioning other. It equates those two things not because they actually are the same, but for the sake of comparison or symbolism. Comparison is direct, hence it is important to know that as and like are not used. As and like can only be used in similes. In metaphor, as and like cannot be used. Examples of metaphor include time is money, not time is like money. Here we say time is money, where we say one thing is the other. No man is an island. Laughter is the best medicine. Age is a state of mind. And if we want to take examples of from literature, we have Shakespeare's play As You Like It, where he says, "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. We have also Emily Dickinson's poem wherein she writes, "Hope is the thing with feathers." Metaphor has been further divided into tenor and vehicle by the British critic I. Richards. I. Richards says that tenor is the subject for which attributes are ascribed in a metaphor. Vehicle is described as the object to whom those attributes are borrowed. If we take the example, the sentence, life is a walking shadow. Here, life represents the tenor and walking shadow the vehicle because it has all the attributes. Metaphor has also been differentiated based on its current and historic usage, and there is something which is called as a dead metaphor, something which was a metaphor in the past but now it has lost all its symbolism. A dead metaphor is a figure of speech that has lost the original imagery or its meaning due to extensive, repetitive and popular usage, because dead metaphors have a conventional meaning that differs from the original. They can be understood without knowing their earlier connotation. Dead metaphors are also known as frozen metaphors or historical metaphors. And if you want to take examples of dead metaphors, uh, we usually say time is running out. Time doesn't run anywhere, but this phrase, this metaphor comes from an earlier usage. When we say time is running out, it means that you almost don't have enough time to do anything you need to do. The original metaphor referred to the sand in an hourglass, so time, as measured by the sand, would literally run out of the top bulb into the bottom, and hence the expression time is running out. Or the second expression, go belly up. A business that has gone belly up means it has failed or closed for good. The term derives from what happens when a fish dies, turning belly up and floating in the top. Now we'll move on to the next literary device, metonymy. Metonymy is a figure of speech in which a thing or concept is referred to by the name of something closely associated with that thing or concept. The word metonymy comes from the Greek metonomia, which means a change of name. The famous example of metonymy would be "The pen is mightier than the sword" by Edward Bulwer Lytton's classic play Richelieu. The sentence has two metonyms. Pen here stands for the written word and sword stands for military aggression. Or if we take Bollywood, it represents association within the movie industry. Press represents association with news organizations. Moving on to the next literary device would be Synecdoche. The word Synecdoche is derived from the word Synecdoche, which means simultaneous understanding. It is a figure of speech in which a term or a part of something refers to the whole of something or vice versa. A figure of speech by which a part is put up for the whole, such as 50 sail or 50 ships. The whole or part, such as society for high society. The species or for the genus, like the cutthroat for assassin. The genus for the species, like a creature for a man. Or the name of the material for the thing made, such as boards for stage. We also have simple examples like green thumb, which represents a person who is good at gardening, boots on the ground, which signifies soldiers, wheels, which signifies vehicles. Personification is derived from the Greek word prosopopeia, in which either an inanimate object or an abstract concept is spoken of as though it were endowed with human attributes. Milton, in his Paradise Lost, as Adam bit into the fatal apple, says, "Sky lowered and muttering thunder, some sad drops wept at completing of the mortal sin. Here, the sky is spoken of as a human being which sheds tears because it is feeling sad and weeping. Sky here is personified, where it has been given human emotions. The next literary device we are going to talk about is the apostrophe. The apostrophe is a special form of personification. It is a direct and explicit address to an absent person or to an abstract or non-human entity. Apostrophe is sometimes represented by the exclamation such as "Oh." A writer or speaker using apostrophe speaks directly to someone who is not present or is dead, or speaks to an inanimate object. Many odes are composed in this mode of address. John Keats begins his famous Ode on a Grecian Urn by apostrophizing the urn. He says, "Thou still unravished bride of quietness." Examples of personification from literature. We have William Shakespeare in his play Macbeth. "Is this the dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee, I will thee not, and yet I see thee still." In his mental conflict before murdering King Duncan, Macbeth has a strange vision of a dagger and talks to it as if it were a person. The next literary device is a conceit. Conceit is a far-fetched comparison between two dissimilar things. Samuel Johnson described it as a kind of discordia concurs. The most heterogeneous ideas are yoked together by violence. T.S. Eliot described the conceit as a product of unified sensibility in his study of metaphysical poets. Conceits are famously used by the metaphysical poets, which we'll learn about in the later chapters. Examples of conceit are Eliot's comparison to evening, to a patient etherized upon a table. Other examples of conceit include, if we take John Donne's for a valediction forbidden mourning, which has many conceits. It starts with, "If they be two, they by two so, as stiff twin compasses are two, thy soul, thy fixed foot makes no show, to move about both if the other do, and though it in the centre sit, yet when the other far doth roam, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home." Here, in this particular example, the conceit used by John Donne is that two lovers are described as the 2 points of a compass, the drawing tool, in which one lover is the point, the other is the point of a pen or a pencil, one rotating around and both leaning towards each other. This is a classic example of a metaphysical conceit. And if we move on to the next, it is hyperbole. Hyperbole is derived from the Greek word meaning overcasting. It is a figure of speech that involves an exaggeration of ideas for the sake of emphasis. For example, when we say, "That suitcase weighed a ton." In this example, the speaker claims that the suitcase weighed a ton or 100 kilograms. Of course, this does not mean that the suitcase literally weighed a ton. The speaker is using hyperbole or exaggeration to emphasize that the suitcase felt very heavy. An understatement is when you represent something as less than what it is. This can be done in writing or in speech. When you make an understatement, the issue at hand is minimalized or made to seem less important or severe. This can be done for an ironic effect or simply to be polite. An understatement is an important figure of speech. Examples include, "It's a bit warm," when the person is literally sweating profusely in a sauna or traveling through the desert at midday. I'm a bit tired after completing a marathon or having not slept the long night. We are in a bit of pickle when cornered in battle or surrounded by sharks while in a lifeboat. These are some of the examples of understatement. And if you want to take examples of understatement from literature, we have the Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, from which we have this particular example. I've got a nice place there, he says, his eyes flashing about restlessly, turning me around by one arm. He moved a broad, flat hand around the front vista, including in its sweep a sunken Italian garden, a half-acre of deep, pungent cruises, and the snub-nosed motorboat that bumped the tide ashore. The narrator says it's a nice place, but we know that it's not a nice place. The quote from Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby is spoken by Tom Buchanan as he and narrator Nick Carraway survey his palatial estate. The estate is obviously more than just nice, as Tom calls it. However, it would be boorish in the society to boast about one's wealth, and instead, Tom let the sight of his house speak for itself. This is an example of understatement. With this, we come to the end of today's lecture. The next video lecture will be a continuation of today's lecture and will further deal with the other literary devices, namely paradox, pun, ambiguity, irony, allusion, alliteration, assonance, onomatopoeia, rhymes, and others. Thank you.